Hello, Lewy Warriors. Joe here for Canadian Lewy Body Dementia Information, and welcome to a new episode of CLBDI Talks. In this episode, I had the privilege of sitting down and speaking with author, Lewy Warrior, and member of the Lewy Body Dementia Resource Center's Board of Directors, Mary Lou Falcone. Mary Lou, thank you for being here. Why don't you take a moment and introduce yourself to our listeners?
Thank you, Joe. I'm delighted to be here. So I am Mary Lou Falcone, and basically I like to define my life in three acts. Act one was as a professional singer, an opera singer and teacher. Act two for 52 years was as a public relations strategist, representing clients like Van Cliburn, Renee Fleming, Gustavo Dudamel, and even James Taylor, and also the institutions, looking after institutions like Carnegie Hall and the Vienna Philharmonic. So that's Act two. But Act three is why I'm here. And now in Act three, I am an advocate for caregivers, a voice for caregivers, and also an advocate for Lewy body dementia awareness, hoping to obliterate two phrases, Lewy what? And how do you spell that? A tall order, but that's what we're addressing.
Well, it is an absolute honor to have you here on the show today. You recently released a memoir, I Didn't See It Coming, Scenes of Love, Loss, and Lewy Body Dementia, which was inspired by the late Nicky Zann and his journey with LBD and your journey with him. Could you please tell our listeners a little more about the book and Nicky and, your whole journey to get to where you are in Act 3 of your life?
Absolutely. And thank you for the wonderful question. Basically, I was the person who said I would never write a book. And I wouldn't have. But Nicky was was a victim of, I guess that's the best way to put it, Lewy body dementia. While he was in his last throes of the disease, he said to me one day, "You have to write." And I had no idea what that meant. And the day he died, I knew exactly what that meant. I had to write about my life and his life, and specifically start with my life at age 10 as a caregiver. I've been a caregiver since age 10. My dad had a massive stroke. The family dynamic was absolutely put on its head, and I've been in the caregiving mode ever since then. So when I came to the being in my 70s and with Nicky having Lewy body dementia, caregiving was not a strange animal to me. It was very, very much part of my DNA. And so our journey with Lewy body dementia was very loving, very caring, difficult, absolutely. Everybody's journey with dementia in general and Lewy body in specific is incredibly, incredibly difficult. And anyone who tells you it's not is probably not being as deeply honest as they can be. But we had a wonderful relationship for 47 years. We were friends, 37 years we were together as a couple, and 3.5 of those years we were married. Why only 3.5, you say? Because at the end, I knew something was dramatically wrong. Nicky's diagnosis of Lewy body dementia was 16 months from diagnosis to death. And 3 years before that, 2017, before the diagnosis ever came in, I was really frightened. And so I asked Nicky a question that he had asked me for 34 years at that point. Every year he'd ask me to marry him, and every year I would say, nope, nope, we have a good thing, let's not spoil it. And then I was frightened, and I was frightened for him, and I wanted to be able to protect him. So I proposed to him. And so in February of 2017, we got married on the 13th of February. On Valentine's Day, we were in Mount Sinai for an angiogram. And on the 15th of February of that year, 2017, Nicky had triple bypass surgery. And that was the beginning of the end. That started the journey to quest for what is really wrong here, because the surgery, the triple bypass surgery, didn't address anything. As a matter of fact, he got worse. And so by 2019, March of 2019, we finally got a diagnosis. But it was the diagnosis with the neurologist on the first try. And anybody who knows anything about Lewy body dementia knows that getting a diagnosis is near on impossible. And yet The first neurologist, the first try, we were sent to the right person and we got the diagnosis. Lewy body dementia with Parkinsonian aspects.
Well, from our own experience and from Carol, our founder's experience, part of the reason why we do these episodes and why we're doing what we're doing is to get that information out there, because this is such a common thing we hear where, uh, um, people, there's misdiagnosis, or, it's so lucky that you guys got it on the first try with the right neurologist, because oftentimes it can be kind of like a mystery for a while that people have to unpack. And you can only confirm LBD medically once the person has passed. So it's amazing to hear that you guys were able to get the diagnosis on the first try. And that's part of the reason why we want to get as much information out there for people so that they can be armed with good knowledge, right? In the process of writing, I didn't see it coming. What did you find the most challenging and rewarding? What surprised you? What did you learn about yourself or your journey?
What I learned about myself when I first started writing was how guarded I was. Now, that didn't really surprise me because I'm the person who's the go-to person in public relations. In particular, people come to me to solve the problems. So and I don't talk about myself. That was a hard and fast rule. Well, that's all changed because now, uh, having written this book, what I had to do was to dig very deeply into my heart and into my soul and make a very conscious decision to tell not only the truth, but the whole truth, which is what I did. Ultimately, I ripped it open and thought it's not going to help anybody if it is not 100% accurate emotionally. And so I ripped the band aid off. But in doing that, Joe, it was an amazing experience because it was my grieving process. I would write, I would sit at my computer with tears streaming down my face, visiting the doctor's notes. I kept monthly logs, which I advocate for everyone to do because you think you're going to remember everything that happened that month. And guess what? You get into the doctor's office and you don't. And when you don't remember it, you start fumbling. Also, your loved one who's sitting in the room with you will probably say somewhere along the line, that never happened. And indeed, it did. And so, if you write it out, all the doctors involved, and there are multiple doctors, have all the same information. You're not embarrassing your loved one, and you can actually be productive instead of destructive. So, I found that very, very important. What I found the hardest was revisiting those notes, those monthly notes over 16 months. And you forget some of the sting of it, and you forget some of the horror of it because it gets pretty rough. But when you go and relive it, you first of all cathartically you let all the emotions out, so the tears flowed. I felt as if I was giving myself a gift by exploring this territory again so that I could release it. And then what I had hoped and what I found out since writing the book is that it would help other people to understand that they were not alone. And indeed, it has absolutely done that and surprises me on a monthly basis what comes into my inbox, my email box from people I've never met and never will.
Well, I absolutely am in my own personal um, creation of art. It's a very I love that you use the word cathartic. It's a very personal processing of these events that happen, but in doing so, you're giving a voice to um, feelings that people often have, that they think that it's just them.
Exactly
And
right.
so I just absolutely love uh, hearing anybody in this space talking about being honest with themselves, and then with other people through their writing or through their speaking about how they felt, about the challenges, about the emotions, about the isolation, but also the joy and the love and just the truth of the journey. So I absolutely love to hear that. And I recommend anybody who is listening to check out I Didn't See It Coming: Scenes of Love, Loss, and Lewy Body Dementia. We will include the link to the book in the description of this video. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your journey with Nicky, with
You're
the world.
welcome. But also, Joe, I wanted to add that when you're talking about yourself and you're being honest and open, if it's about you, you can say anything you want because that's your purview. But when you're talking about someone else, it's good to get permission. But how do you get permission to talk about some of these things from somebody who's gone? And so I found myself going to a bench in Central Park. There's a bench in Central Park here in New York City, which is dedicated to Nicky. And I found myself going to the bench, putting my hand on the plaque and saying, Nicky, I'm about to say XYZ. I need to know it's all right. Send me a sign. And I promise you, what happened was my shoulders went down, my heart rate absolutely went down, everything just calmed, and I knew I could do it.
Well, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Now, along with being an author, you are directly involved with Norma Loeb, former guest of the show, and the Lewy Body Dementia Resource Center. You sit on the board of directors. This is a relatively new facet of your life following your experiences with Nicky and LBD. What has that been like, and what are you most proud of?
When I was in trouble, when we got the diagnosis back in March of 2019, as brilliant as the doctor was, and he was at diagnosis, he was useless with practical information. Every question I asked, he wouldn't answer. And so I had to find my own path. In finding my own path, the actor David Hyde Pierce, who was a dear friend of Nicky's and mine, told me about Caring Kind, an organization which is basically a Alzheimer's organization, but they also dabble in other related dementia. And they are the ones that told me about the Lewy Body Dementia Resource Center, and Norma Loeb gave me her phone number. She answered the phone when I called, and the rest is beautiful history because they and the Resource Center and Norma were my lifeline, were the lifeline for Nicky and me during his 16 months. I joined the support group that they had at the time and encouraged them to put a second support group in every month, that we needed two, not one, which they did. I was just the recipient of amazing information, which is the one thing the neurologist told me. He said, you're going to find out more from people who have the disease or who are dealing with it than you will from anyone else. Well, indeed, he was right about that. But he didn't give me any outlets that I could go to. Anyway, I did find Norma and I did go to that outlet. And I vowed that at the end of the journey, because with Lewy body, right now, there is no cure, there is no slowing it down yet. But at the end of the journey, I vowed that I would be a pair of hands. I would in some way enhance, worked for the Lewy Body Dementia Resource Center. When that day came and I volunteered, I was asked to be on the board of directors, which I accepted with the greatest of pleasure so that I could give back. In the process, in the first couple of months on the board, we were talking about getting the word out. How do you get the word out? You know, we're very good. As you know, the Lewy Body Dementia Resource Center has an amazing website. It's now, I think Norma just hit 10 languages on the website, which is quite amazing. It's comprehensive. It gives you so much information. But we wanted to do something for a broader public, and that would be video, something in the film world. When we started to discuss that, what was being discussed were small vignettes, you know, kind of mom and pop things. And I said, no, if I'm going to get involved in this, we're not going to do it in a modest way. We're going to go for broke. And I will try to raise the money to go for broke. And so we started a project The end result is a documentary film called Facing the Wind. It took 3 years from conception to completion. Through an actress friend of mine, I found the filmmakers who were turned out to be not just brilliant, but compassionately brilliant in what they did. And they were wedded to causes, and they saw the need for this kind of a film. And so they joined, and they did. In my opinion, it's a 58-minute film. It is brilliantly done because it follows three couples in real time and what real life looks like when you're dealing with Lewy body dementia. While it's sad, while it's traumatic, while it has all those elements, it is also full of hope and resilience. And so the Lewy Body Dementia Resource Center became the fiscal sponsor of this film, meaning that all the money that was raised went through them. And the film was a $700,000 film, so it's not a small deal. And I'm very happy to report that it has received amazing accolades from everybody who's seen it. People are not cowed by it. They're not daunted by it. They are they are energized by it. They are uplifted by it. Those have been the comments. It is now slated to go to PBS, Public Broadcasting System here in the United States, next spring. So it has been accepted, which is just miraculous and wonderful.
Well, I have to say, having seen the film myself, it is incredibly moving. And we will include the link also in the description. Norma and I spoke about it. I recommend anybody who is on a Lewy journey or interested. It's not only informative and touching, but it's also just, as someone who studied film, very competently made and just what a watch. So congratulations on that. And
Thank you.
and I highly recommend everybody listening check it out. What a wonderful piece of film and wonderful documentary.
Thank you. Thank you. We're very proud of it because it's doing its job. It's spreading the word.
Now, being someone who's connected to the world of music and art, do you have any thoughts on the potential benefits of music and or art therapy for people living with dementia?
Yes, I do. First of all, it seems to me that the arts, painting, drawing, music, are the last vestige that people with dementia can still hang on to. In my husband's case, in Nicky Zann's case, he was an artist. He was a very, very fine artist. His work hangs in the Victoria and Albert Museum, for instance. And so toward the end, the last thing that Nicky drew about 3 months before he died was a cartoon to apologize for snapping at me. It's a very, very beautiful, sentimental piece of paper that I keep framed on my desk because it still illustrates the ability of art to express more than words can. That's for starters. The other thing was with Nicky, I'll go back to that. In the last months of his life, we have a beautiful grand piano, and Nicky was a rocker. He was a rock and roll teenage idol in the 1950s and into the 60s. And I heard from the hallway the rock going from the piano. Now, Nicky could hardly walk, and his hands didn't work in terms of being able to cut things, cut food and all that. But he could go back and play that piano. So that sense memory thing was one of the last things to leave. It has been proven in so many cases that people respond to music. They may not be able to play, they may not be able to sing, they may not be able to dance, but they have this sense of joy that comes into their lives from it. And so any music therapy that one can put one's hands on, go for it. You never know what's going to touch the person and bring them back to a time which makes them smile and makes them calm.
What excellent advice. I couldn't agree more. And it's amazing to hear that you have even the personal anecdotal stories to back that up with Nicky and playing the piano and the cartoon. That's all, it's beautiful. Um, I like how you worded that the last vestiges of kind of, connection. There's a really, uh, I think it's a very interesting field, art, music, neurology, and how it all connects together. And, it's so unfortunate that diseases like Lewy body dementia have to be the kind of um, impetus to start exploring that more, because you never want anybody to have neurodegenerative diseases. But I agree totally. If you have a chance to enter art therapy or music therapy, please consider it if you're listening and you're a caretaker for a loved one with dementia. I think it's a really powerful tool. And speaking of our listeners, do you have any advice for them, whether they're carers, family members, or people early on their own journey with dementia, that you'd like to share?
Yes, I would. First of all, for caregivers, you are not alone. We are here for you in many forms. Next, people with dementia want to know that they're loved, they're protected, they're safe. And even when you think they're not responding, they don't hear you, they don't feel what you're saying, think again. I've I've actually broached this with many neurologists, and they can't tell me I'm wrong. So therefore, I assume I'm right. And that is that when you touch the cheek of someone with dementia, when you say, I love you, when it's a gentle tone, when it's a stroking of the hand, just kind gestures, they read like neon signs for the person with dementia. And so, therefore, don't ever assume that they're not hearing you, they're not feeling you, they're not responsive to you, because inwardly they are.
I couldn't agree more. One of our former guests, Natalia, was a registered nurse working in a long-term care home here in Waterloo, and they adopted a strategy of care called the butterfly strategy, which was a lot about returning dignity and autonomy to the people living in the long-term care home, and treating them like people, instead of patients. Of course, they are there to care for them and to help them and be there for them, but even giving those affirmations of humanity and independence and autonomy, much like giving the love and respect and kindness to people who are living with neurodegenerative diseases like LBD or Alzheimer's. Like you said, like a neon sign, right? People at the core want to be loved, respected, and feel supported. And support doesn't necessarily mean telling them how to live. It's
No,
being there to be there for them when they need it, and to show that
right.
they're loved. So I love that you brought that up, and I think it's great advice. Thank you so much for being on the show. Do you have any last thoughts or anything you'd like to share
Yes,
before we end today?
I two things. First is the word you just used, dignity. Dignity is so important. The one thing that Nicky asked for when he was diagnosed and he knew what the disease was, he said, please help me to keep my dignity. And I was able to do that. Part of keeping one's dignity is allowing the person to do what they want and need to do as long as it's safe. If it's not safe, of course, you're not going to allow it. But if it's safe, please don't argue that the tablecloth is purple when it's white. It's just those things are so minor in the big scope of things. So no one likes to be controlled 100% of the time. None of us does. So it's time, I think, when you're dealing with someone with a dementia, any neurodegenerative disease, to allow a lot of slack. And if it's not dangerous, allow the dignity to be preserved.
Absolutely. What a wonderful note to end our conversation on. I want to thank you again so much for taking the time to speak with me. The links to I Didn't See It Coming and to Facing the Wind are available in the description of this video. Please, if you're listening, go and check out the Lewy Body Dementia Resource Center, check out Facing the Wind, check out I Didn't See It Coming. Mary Lou, thank you so much for joining us on this episode.
Joe, thank you for this wonderful opportunity.
All right. Thank you all for listening, and we'll be back with another episode in a few months. Take care.